So, you think your apartment's a bit chilly in winter? Or maybe you complain about a draft from a window? Please, let's talk about real cold, about a cold that seeped into your bones, not just your living room. We're talking about medieval peasants, right? Those hardy souls living lives that make your roughing it weekend look like a spa retreat. They faced winters that weren't just a season, but a test, a relentless enemy that tried to freeze them out of existence every single night. Forget central heating, forget even a proper chimney. Their homes were, well, they were there. But how did they actually sleep? How do you find rest when every breath is visible and the line between surviving the night and becoming a frozen statistic is razor thin? It's not what the fairy tales tell you. It's grimmer, tougher, and frankly, far more fascinating. Watch the video to the end and you'll find out what was the true cost, expressed in sweat, pain, and lives, of simply finding rest under a roof in medieval England and how they truly survived the long, dark, and deadly nights. The peasant's home was a primitive crucible of survival, a desperate daily attempt to capture and contain any fleeting warmth against the relentless, biting medieval winters. These were emphatically not the imposing, unyielding stone fortresses of the nobility with their thick walls and towering defenses. Instead, they were humble crofts and longhouses, utterly unadorned and fundamentally practical, fashioned directly from the very earth their inhabitants toiled upon. The sheer act of their construction was a profound testament to generations of backbreaking communal labor and an inherited wealth of accumulated experiential knowledge, a vernacular architecture born of necessity, not luxury. The walls serving as the dwelling's primary and most crucial barrier against the brutal external world were meticulously constructed using the ancient, time-honored technique of wattle and daub. This process began with the painstaking weaving of flexible branches, the wattle into a sturdy, interconnected latticework frame, forming the skeleton of the wall. This intricate framework was then generously and laboriously packed with daub, a potent organic concoction painstakingly mixed from local clay, fine sand for grit, reinforcing straw for tensile strength, and even animal dung for binding and insulation properties. Once this composite mixture thoroughly dried and hardened under the sun and wind, it formed a surprisingly effective, albeit inherently permeable, barrier against the raw elements. However, a truly airtight seal was an unattainable luxury. The ceaseless, insidious wind found every minute crack and hidden crevice, every tiny imperfection or shrinkage in the dried daub, creating a pervasive, frigid draft that snaked relentlessly through the dwelling like an unseen phantom. This constant ingress of cold air served as a chilling, inescapable reminder of winter's relentless, unyielding assault. The very air inside the dwelling was perpetually alive with these unseen currents of cold, transforming the interior into a continuous, exhausting battleground against the invading frost. The floor, typically just hard-packed earth, offered only minimal insulation against the pervasive, bone-deep cold. The frigid chill seeped directly and relentlessly upwards from the frozen ground, an insidious, relentless cold that no amount of scattered straw or rushes, however thickly laid, could ever fully abate. It was a penetrating cold that reached into one's very bones, numbing limbs and rendering every movement a conscious, uncomfortable effort against the pervasive discomfort. Overhead, the thatched roof, a thick, expertly laid and interwoven layer of straw or reeds, provided some crucial protection from the direct impact of snow and rain, acting as the first essential line of defense against precipitation. Yet its equally vital, if not more important function, was to trap the precious, hard-won heat generated within the dwelling, preventing its rapid escape into the frigid atmosphere above. This created a precarious, delicate, and often dangerous balance. If too much smoke became trapped inside, the air quickly became unbreathable, risking asphyxiation, chronic respiratory illness, or even death. Conversely, if too much ventilation was allowed, the meager, painstakingly generated warmth vanished almost as quickly as it was produced, leaving the inhabitants shivering and vulnerable. Every single aspect of the dwelling's design, construction, and daily management was a fundamental compromise, a desperate, precarious dance between the dire, life-or-death necessity of shelter and the stark, unyielding limitations of readily available, often rudimentary, materials. It stood as a vivid, living, breathing example of humanity's ingenious adaptation to harsh realities, relying solely on what the immediate land and their own ingenuity could provide. As the wind howled outside, threatening to extinguish the very flame of life within, the peasants clung to their most vital invention, fire. This raw, untamed element was the literal heart of their survival. But how did they manage to tame it within their crude dwellings? And what hidden dangers lurked in the very air they breathed? The answers reveal a complex interplay of necessity, ingenuity, and inevitable hardship. The true heart of the medieval peasant's home, the very pulse of its meager survival, was the central hearth. Unlike the more sophisticated chimneys that would emerge in later eras, efficiently channeling smoke upwards and out, the medieval hearth was often nothing more than a shallow depression in the packed earth floor. Here, a small, carefully tended fire was kept burning, a flickering beacon against the encroaching darkness and cold. The smoke, thick and acrid, was largely left to find its own meandering way out, either through a small rudimentary hole in the roof, or, more commonly, simply by dispersing slowly through the inherently porous walls and the loose weave of the thatch roof. This was not a system designed for comfort or efficiency, but purely for survival. The fire itself was an inestimable, precious commodity. Fuel, primarily wood gathered painstakingly from the surrounding, often sparse forests, was collected with immense effort and meticulously rationed. Every twig, every fallen branch, represented a vital contribution to the flickering flame that stood as the sole barrier between the family and the brutal onset of hypothermia. The smoke, while an undeniable nuisance and irritant, served a dual, perhaps even triple, purpose beyond just heat. It acted as a crude deterrent against insects, driving away flies and other pests that would otherwise infest the dwelling. There was also a prevalent belief that it could ward off evil spirits, providing a psychological layer of protection in a superstitious age. More practically, the constant presence of smoke helped to season the timbers of the roof, preserving them from rot and decay, thus extending the life of the dwelling itself. However, the undeniable cost of this arrangement was the constant inhalation of smoke, which undoubtedly took a severe toll on the occupants' lungs, leading to pervasive chronic coughs, debilitating respiratory ailments, and a susceptibility to fatal lung diseases. For the most vulnerable, children and the elderly, this perpetual haze of smoke was a silent, insidious killer, adding yet another layer of peril to an already harsh existence. The warmth radiating from this meager, flickering fire was often the only source of heat available, compelling families to huddle close together, sharing precious body heat, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames, their elongated shadows stretching like spectral figures across the crude, uneven walls. The peasants' ingenuity extended far beyond simply burning wood. They possessed an intuitive, experiential understanding of the principle of thermal mass, even if they lacked the sophisticated scientific terminology to articulate it. This deep, practical knowledge formed the basis of their sophisticated yet simple heat banking system, a vital innovation for prolonged warmth. A crucial technique involved the strategic placement of large stones, meticulously collected from nearby fields or riverbeds, around the edges of the central fire. Once thoroughly heated by the flames, these stones would retain their warmth for hours, slowly radiating a comforting heat into the dwelling long after the flames themselves had dwindled or died down for the night. This passive heat release was crucial for maintaining a tolerable temperature through the dark, frigid hours. Children, or those most vulnerable to the biting cold, might even sleep with a smaller, especially heated stone carefully wrapped in cloth, using it as a rudimentary, effective hot water bottle against the persistent chill. This simple yet profound practice offered a small but significant comfort in a world of pervasive discomfort. Another remarkably cunning technique involved burying hot coals in a shallow pit beneath the hearth, carefully covering them with a layer of ash to slow their combustion to an almost imperceptible crawl. This method allowed a small, steady amount of heat to be released over an extended period, often throughout the entire night, ensuring that the dwelling never became completely frigid and unbearable. Come morning, with a bit of fanning to supply oxygen and the addition of fresh kindling, these glowing embers could be revived with relative ease, saving the laborious, time-consuming, and often frustrating process of starting a new fire completely from scratch. This generational knowledge passed down through whispered instructions and patient demonstration was absolutely vital for survival. A single misjudgment, too much ash stifling the embers, or not enough air to keep them alive, could mean a bitterly cold start to a potentially deadly day. Shared body heat was also an indispensable component of their survival strategy. Families, often large and multi-generational, would sleep tightly packed together, their collective warmth forming a formidable living defense against the biting cold. In particularly harsh nights, larger livestock like pigs or cattle were often brought into the dwelling, their substantial body heat contributing significantly to the ambient temperature. This was not a choice made for comfort or sentimentality, but a stark, undeniable necessity, blurring the traditional lines between human and animal and uniting all living beings within the dwelling in a desperate common struggle against the encroaching frost. How did these impoverished families with no access to modern fabrics or heating technologies shield themselves from the freezing winds and pervasive dampness that constantly threatened their very existence? Prepare to be amazed by the cunning, ingenious methods of their clothing and insulation protocols, a matter of life and death woven into every thread and every layer. The medieval peasant's wardrobe was not a matter of fleeting fashion, but a meticulously constructed, multi-layered defense system against the unforgiving elements. Their comprehensive clothing and insulation protocol was born directly out of dire necessity and refined over centuries of accumulated, hard-won wisdom. The primary materials at their disposal were the humble yet remarkably effective wool and linen, each serving a distinct and crucial purpose. Wool, shorn directly from their own sheep, was undeniably coarse and itchy against the skin, but its natural crimp and structure made it incredibly effective at trapping air, creating a vital layer of insulative warmth. Crucially, wool retained a significant portion of its insulating properties even when damp or wet, an invaluable advantage in the perpetually damp and often rainy climate of medieval England. Linen, derived from the versatile flax plant, was reserved for inner garments, providing a smoother, more comfortable layer directly against the skin, preventing the irritation of coarser wool and wicking away some moisture. Layering was paramount. It was the cornerstone of their thermal management strategy. Multiple thin layers of clothing were understood to be far more effective than a single thick one, as each layer trapped additional pockets of insulating air. This sophisticated understanding allowed for crucial adjustment as external conditions changed throughout the day and night, providing flexibility that a single garment could not. Essential components of their daily attire included tunics of varying lengths, leggings for the lower body, substantial cloaks for overarching protection, and various head coverings. Hoods and mantles were particularly important for protecting the head and neck, areas where a significant amount of heat loss can occur due to the body's vascularity and the brain's need for stable temperature. Footwear, often simplistic leather shoes or rudimentary wooden clogs, offered alarmingly minimal protection against the icy ground and pervasive dampness, making frostbite a constant, debilitating threat that could easily lead to amputation or worse. Inside the dwelling, additional, crucial insulation came from copious amounts of straw and rushes, spread thickly across the earth floor. This layer not only added a vital cushion of warmth beneath foot, but also acted as a crude absorbent for some of the ever-present dampness that permeated the dwelling. These organic materials were regularly changed, a ceaseless, back-breaking chore, to prevent the perilous buildup of vermin and the spread of disease, a vital undertaking for maintaining even a baseline of health and survival. The loss of a single protective cloak, a significant rip in a tunic, or the persistent dampness in footwear could initiate a rapid, irreversible descent into hypothermia, representing a swift and brutally efficient end to a life already teetering precariously on the very edge of subsistence. In the harsh world of the medieval peasant, Sleep was not a comforting, restful escape from daily toil, but a strategic maneuver in the ongoing, relentless battle against the cold. The peasants' bedding and sleeping arrangements were ingeniously designed to maximize shared warmth and cunningly utilize every available resource, blurring the lines between human comfort and animal necessity. Beds, as we conceive of them today, elevated structures with frames and mattresses, were largely non-existent luxuries. Most peasants slept on simple straw palliasse mattresses laid directly on the packed earth floor, or, if fortunate, on rudimentary wooden platforms. These rudimentary mattresses, essentially large sacks generously filled with fresh straw, provided a crucial, albeit thin, layer of insulation from the bone-chilling cold emanating from the ground beneath. Over these, rough wool blankets or animal hides, often sheepskins or deerskins, were used as covers, providing additional layers of warmth and protection. However, the single most effective and pervasive strategy for warmth retention was co-sleeping. The entire family unit, encompassing multiple generations from elderly grandparents to newborn infants, would often sleep huddled tightly together in a single, communal mass. Their collective body heat created a remarkable, albeit close quarters, microclimate of warmth that was far more effective than individual coverings. This practice was not merely a matter of comfort or familial bonding. It was a fundamental, non-negotiable survival mechanism. The warmth generated by one body directly helped sustain and protect another, creating a symbiotic relationship essential for enduring the frigid nights. Beyond the human element, animals often played a surprisingly crucial role in providing additional vital warmth. Young livestock, such as calves, lambs, or even pigs, might be brought directly into the dwelling on the coldest, most treacherous nights. Their large bodies radiated a significant amount of heat, substantially contributing to the ambient temperature within the crowded space. The inevitable stench, the unsanitary conditions, and the general discomfort were simply accepted as an unavoidable price of survival, an unpleasant but necessary trade-off for staying alive. Every living breath, every warm body, whether human or animal, was considered a valuable resource to be exploited in the desperate nightly pursuit of a morning thaw. The ever-present risk of disease and parasitic infestations, stemming from the close proximity to animals and the inherently poor sanitation, was a grim reality. Yet the immediate and certain alternative was a swift, brutal death by exposure to the elements. Winter was not just a season. It was the ultimate brutal test of a family's foresight, their capacity for meticulous planning, and the stark, uncompromising reality of medieval food and fuel logistics. The harvest season was a frenetic, back-breaking race against time, a desperate scramble to gather and process enough provisions to simply survive through the lean, barren months that followed. Scarcity was the defining, ever-present characteristic of winter life, dictating every action and decision. Food, primarily coarse grain destined for the daily baking of bread, supplemented by hearty root vegetables, carefully dried meat, and some limited preserved dairy products like cheese, was meticulously rationed. Every single crumb, every precious morsel was accounted for and consumed with an acute awareness of its finite supply. Storage methods, while rudimentary, were absolutely vital for preventing spoilage and loss. Grain, the lifeblood of their diet, was stored in dry, cool places, often in robust earthenware pots or sturdy wooden chests, specifically designed to protect it from the twin threats of gnawing rodents and insidious dampness that could quickly ruin an entire season's yield. Hardy root vegetables like parsnips, turnips, and carrots were often buried in earth clamps, insulated pits in the ground, or stored in cool, dark cellars, further insulated by layers of straw to prevent freezing and spoilage. Meat, a rare but prized commodity, was rigorously salted, smoked, or air-dried to prevent putrefaction and extend its shelf life as long as possible. Despite these efforts, these methods were far from foolproof, and spoilage, vermin infestations, and outright theft were constant, terrifying threats, any of which could swiftly plunge a family into the abyss of starvation. Fuel, predominantly gathered wood and sometimes precious dried animal dung, was equally, if not more, precious than food itself. Gathering it was an arduous, dangerous task, often involving perilous treks into snow-covered, frozen forests, where the risk of serious injury, getting hopelessly lost in a blizzard, or encountering dangerous wild animals was frighteningly high. Every piece of gathered wood was stacked with meticulous care, seasoned for months to maximize its caloric output, and then burned with the utmost efficiency. A fire that burned too hot, too quickly, or for too long was considered a profligate, unforgivable waste of life-sustaining warmth, a direct threat to survival. The entire cyclical rhythm of medieval peasant life in winter was absolutely dictated by the precarious availability of these two fundamental resources, food and fuel. Their absence, even in seemingly small quantities, meant certain agonizing death by cold or starvation. Beyond the tangible tools and rudimentary techniques, the medieval peasants' greatest, most profound asset in enduring the relentless grip of winter was their intrinsic mindset of endurance. This was not merely stubbornness, but a profound resilience forged in generations of unrelenting hardship, tempered by the ceaseless demands of survival against overwhelming odds. Community was absolutely paramount. It was the bedrock upon which their survival rested. While individual families huddled tightly within the fragile confines of their homes, the wider village structure offered a crucial, albeit fragile, safety net. Neighbors, bound by shared struggles and mutual dependence, extended aid whenever possible, sharing meager resources during periods of extreme scarcity, offering comfort and practical help to the sick or struggling, and collaborating on larger essential tasks like clearing snow-blocked paths or repairing damaged dwellings. Despite the profound sense of isolation that individual families might experience within their cold homes, this isolation was never truly absolute within the tight-knit village bounds. Faith provided a deep wellspring of solace and offered a crucial framework for understanding and perhaps even accepting the relentless, often capricious forces of nature. Prayers for mild winters, for the blessings of a successful harvest, and for the health and well-being of their cherished families were not mere rituals, but deeply ingrained, heartfelt supplications that permeated every aspect of their daily lives. The local church, often the most substantial building in the village, served as a vital communal space, offering a brief, precious respite from the frigid confines of their humble homes. It was a place for shared worship, for gathering warmth from the collective presence, and for nurturing a shared sense of hope against despair. Crucially, generational knowledge was the invisible, yet incredibly strong thread that held their very survival together. There were no printed textbooks, no elaborate instruction manuals, no modern scientific guides. Instead, every single technique, every hard-won strategy for survival, every subtle nuance of predicting unpredictable weather patterns, and every intricate method of preserving precious food was passed down orally. This wisdom flowed through direct observation, meticulous imitation, and intense lived experience from one generation to the next. The wisdom of elders was not just respected, but profoundly revered, for their very existence into old age was a living, breathing testament to their unparalleled mastery of survival in a world that offered no second chances. A single poor harvest, an unexpectedly brutal, prolonged frost, or a critical, unforgivable mistake in judgment could lead to catastrophic, irreversible consequences, plunging an entire family into starvation or exposure. The stakes were always unflinchingly life or death, imbuing every decision, every action, with a primal, visceral intensity. The constant looming threat of winter stripped away all pretense, all comfort, leaving only the raw, unvarnished, tenacious will to live as their ultimate defining characteristic. While the immediate overwhelming threat of the cold loomed largest in the medieval peasant's mind, they faced a myriad of other insidious perils during their long, dark winter nights, many of which were directly linked to their rudimentary, often unsanitary, living conditions. Pests were a relentless nuisance and a profoundly significant health hazard. Rats and mice, driven by an instinctive search for warmth and the irresistible allure of stored food, scurried ceaselessly through the straw-covered floors and porous walls, contaminating precious provisions and acting as efficient vectors for the spread of debilitating diseases. Fleas and lice, breeding voraciously in unwashed clothing and bedding, caused incessant, maddening itching and profound discomfort, often leading to painful skin infections. These pervasive infestations were far more than just an annoyance. They were active vectors for serious, often fatal illnesses that could swiftly decimate an entire family, particularly during the weakened, vulnerable state brought on by the rigors of winter. Disease was an ever-present, ominous shadow that clung to every corner of their lives. The close quarters, the inherently poor ventilation, despite the crude smoke holes, and the widespread lack of basic sanitation created ideal, fertile breeding grounds for a terrifying array of ailments. Respiratory infections, severely exacerbated by constant smoke inhalation and cold, damp air, were tragically common, frequently escalating into deadly pneumonia, especially among the highly vulnerable young and elderly. Dysentery and other virulent gastrointestinal illnesses spread rapidly and devastatingly due to pervasive contaminated water sources and food, coupled with a general, unavoidable lack of personal and communal hygiene. The unforgiving winter months, characterized by drastically reduced sunlight and severely limited access to fresh, nutrient-rich food, also contributed significantly to widespread nutritional deficiencies, further weakening the body's already struggling defenses against invading diseases. Simple cuts or minor abrasions, if left untreated in the unsanitary environment, could quickly turn septic, leading to gangrene, limb loss, or other life-threatening systemic infections. The shockingly high infant mortality rate and the remarkably shorter life expectancies of the medieval period serve as grim, stark reminders of the pervasive, relentless health challenges faced by these communities, particularly during the brutal, disease-ridden winter months. Beyond the biological threats, significant environmental hazards pose persistent and terrifying dangers within their fragile dwellings. The open hearth, while absolutely vital for providing warmth and allowing for cooking, was a constant lurking fire risk in homes constructed predominantly of highly flammable materials like dry thatch and abundant straw. A single stray spark, easily ignited by a gust of wind or an accidental nudge, could swiftly engulf an entire home in a terrifying inferno, destroying precious, irreplaceable belongings and leaving a family utterly exposed and vulnerable to the immediate, deadly elements. The pervasive smoke, as previously mentioned, also presented a significant, silent risk of carbon monoxide poisoning, especially if ventilation was insufficient or became blocked. While chronic exposure led to debilitating respiratory issues, acute high-level exposure could be rapidly fatal, leading to a silent, undetectable death during the night, as victims would simply slip away in their sleep. The ever-present threat of roof collapse from heavy, accumulated snowfall or severe structural damage from strong, gale-force winds also constantly loomed, transforming a fragile shelter into a deadly, inescapable trap. Every single night was an inherent gamble, a testament to their profound, unyielding vulnerability in a world that offered no quarter. To truly grasp the profound reality of how medieval peasants slept during the brutal winter months, one must attempt to immerse themselves fully in the rich, unfiltered, sensory landscape of their nights, a world utterly removed from our modern, quiet, climate-controlled bedrooms. The sounds of the night were raw, immediate, and utterly unfiltered. Outside their fragile dwellings, the relentless howl of the wind was an ever-present, constant companion, rattling incessantly through the woven wattle and plastered daub of their walls, a chilling, persistent reminder of the cold's unyielding grip and its pervasive reach. Inside, the comforting, almost rhythmic crackling and spitting of the central fire provided a small, vital source of warmth and a rhythmic background noise, interspersed with the soft rustling of straw beneath sleeping bodies, the subtle movements of slumbering family members, and the occasional unsettling scuttling of unseen, unwelcome pests. Livestock brought indoors for their precious warmth added their own distinct nocturnal sounds. The soft, steady breathing of placid cattle, the occasional grunt of a sleeping pig, or the gentle bleating of sheep, creating a cacophony of life that would be utterly unimaginable to modern sleepers, yet was entirely normal and expected for them. The smells were equally pervasive and distinct, creating a dense, inescapable olfactory tapestry. The dominant scent was, without a doubt, smoke, a thick, acrid presence that permeated every fiber of their clothing, every strand of hair, and the very air they breathed with every labored inhalation. This pungent aroma mingled seamlessly with the earthy scent of damp soil that made up their floors, the musty organic smell of straw and animal hides used for bedding, and the undeniable strong presence of human and animal effluvia in an age utterly devoid of modern sanitation. Even the faint aroma of meager cooking, remnants from the day's frugal meals, would linger heavily in the stagnant air. These were, by any modern standard, not pleasant odors, often described as stifling or repugnant. However, for the medieval peasant, these were the unmistakable smells of life, of continuous survival, of a home, no matter how humble or crude. The very air itself was a dense, complex tapestry woven from these natural, animal, and undeniably human odors, serving as a constant, visceral reminder of their intimate, inseparable connection to their immediate environment and their fundamental bodily existence. Darkness, true, unadulterated darkness, was absolute, without any source of artificial light beyond the flickering, dancing flames of the central fire. The nights were profoundly, terrifyingly black, particularly in the deep, seemingly endless depths of winter. This profound lack of light forced an acute reliance on their other senses, honing their hearing and smell to an extraordinary degree, and likely contributed to a fundamentally different sleep pattern than our own continuous 8 hours. Many historians and anthropologists suggest that segmented sleep was a common and natural pattern in medieval times. 2 shorter, distinct periods of sleep separated by a period of wakefulness during the deep night. In this profound, enveloping darkness, with little to occupy their time, peasants might have used this nocturnal period for quiet reflection, for tending diligently to the fire, or perhaps even for hushed, intimate conversation with family members. The complete absence of light pollution meant that the stars would have been breathtakingly vivid and brilliant on clear nights, a distant, cold beauty visible, perhaps, through the rudimentary smoke hole in the roof. This deep, unadulterated darkness would have profoundly shaped their entire perception of the night, making every subtle sound and every lingering smell more pronounced and significant, simultaneously heightening their inherent vulnerability to the unknown and the unseen. While the physical challenges of winter sleep were undeniably immense and ever-present, it is absolutely crucial to transcend the tangible and consider the intricate psychological and emotional landscape of these long, dark, and often silent nights. Beyond the immediate visceral struggle for warmth and the constant gnawing anxiety of food scarcity, what profound thoughts and feelings truly filled the minds of medieval peasants as they lay huddled in the all-encompassing darkness? Dreams, no doubt, offered a brief, ephemeral escape from their harsh realities, or served as a direct reflection of their waking anxieties and desires. They might have dreamt of impossibly bountiful harvests, of glorious warmth and sunshine, or conversely, been plagued by terrifying nightmares of starvation and the chilling specter of freezing to death. Their deeply ingrained dreamscapes would have been vividly populated by the stark realities of their daily lives. Vast fields, their precious livestock, the familiar faces of the village community, and the ever-present, relentless struggle against the unforgiving forces of nature. Fears were constant, unwelcome companions during those endless nights. The gnawing fear of hunger was pervasive, a constant knot in the stomach. There was the ever-present dread of illness, suddenly striking a beloved child or an elder. The terrifying prospect of the crude roof collapsing under the oppressive weight of heavy snow, or the chilling possibility of an unseasonably cold snap that could utterly wipe out their meager, carefully hoarded provisions. Superstitions and deeply held religious beliefs also played a profound, often terrifying role in their nocturnal anxieties. The absolute darkness was frequently associated with malevolent spirits, mischievous fey folk, or terrifying creatures of the night, adding another potent layer of psychological vulnerability and fear. The profound silence of the deepest night, broken only by the most primal, natural sounds, could amplify these deeply ingrained fears, making the unknown even more unsettling and menacing. For centuries, the rich tapestry of folklore across Europe is replete with chilling tales of winter spirits, monstrous frost giants, and other supernatural entities intimately associated with the cold and the oppressive dark, eloquently reflecting a deep-seated primordial apprehension of the season's inherent dangers. Yet despite the overwhelming, pervasive hardships and the constant presence of fear, there was always the perennial, unyielding hope of spring. This hope was not merely an abstract, philosophical concept, but a deeply tangible, viscerally ingrained expectation that served as the very fuel for their remarkable endurance. Every single cold, agonizing night endured was perceived as one crucial step closer to the inevitable thaw, to the promise of new growth in the fields, to the resurgence of life in the forests, and to the less immediate, less pressing threat of the elements. The gradual, almost imperceptible lengthening of the days, even by mere minutes, would have been keenly noticed and celebrated as small, yet profoundly significant victories, tiny beacons in the lingering darkness. The very ability to survive another harrowing winter was an enduring testament to their extraordinary strength, their ingenious adaptability, and their unshakable communal spirit. This underlying hope, however fragile it might sometimes appear, was undoubtedly a powerful psychological anchor, enabling them to face the relentless daily grind and the nightly struggle for survival, providing the fundamental motivation to simply wake up and courageously continue the fight for another day. It was a profound cyclical existence of struggle and anticipation, with sleep serving as a brief, often uneasy, yet essential pause in their continuous, arduous battle against the harsh, unforgiving elements. The medieval peasant's winter sleep was not a cozy, comfortable experience, but a gritty testament to human resilience and ingenuity in the face of brutal conditions. From meticulously banking fires to the surprising use of smoky air as a potential microbe repellent, and even the subconscious acceptance of segmented sleep. Their methods were born of absolute necessity and an intuitive understanding of their precarious environment. They slept not in luxury, but with a profound connection to their surroundings, their animals, and most importantly, each other. Their nights were a crucial act of survival, a communal effort against the unforgiving cold, and a constant, silent prayer for the return of spring. What aspect of medieval peasant life would you be most interested in seeing explored in our next video? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from history's forgotten corners.